The email landed in my inbox with a quiet ping, but the words inside screamed betrayal. Congratulations to David and Marcus for securing the Helios account. There it was, my 3 months of work, my strategy, my late nights, all attributed to two men who couldn't even pronounce the client's name correctly last week. I stared at my computer screen, coffee growing cold beside my keyboard, as something inside me shifted from shock to a cold, calculated clarity. They had no idea what they'd just started. My name is Sophia Reynolds, and until that moment, I was known as the reliable team player at Meridian Consulting, the one who stayed late, who picked up the slack, who smiled and nodded when others took the spotlight. The perfect corporate doormat. But doormats, when finally lifted, reveal what's been gathering underneath. And in my case, it was years of resentment, overlooked talent, and a detailed knowledge of every client's needs that my credit-stealing colleagues couldn't begin to understand. This isn't a story about getting even. It's about getting everything. I've always been good at reading people. It's what made me excellent at my job. Understanding what clients truly needed, sometimes before they knew themselves. David Mercer and Marcus Webb, however, were painfully easy to read. David, our department director, was all corporate buzzwords and golf metaphors. A man who measured success by the square footage of his office. Marcus was his protege, younger and hungrier. With an MBA he mentioned in every conversation and a habit of standing too close when speaking to female colleagues. I should explain how I ended up at Meridian in the first place. 6 years ago, fresh out of graduate school with a dual degree in business and environmental science, I was idealistic and eager to make a difference. I wanted to help companies become more sustainable without sacrificing profitability, to prove that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. Meridian Consulting had a growing green division that promised exactly that opportunity. My interview with Janet Palmer, the CEO, had been inspiring. A rare female executive in the consulting world, she spoke passionately about changing business from the inside out. I left that meeting convinced I'd found my professional home, a place where merit would matter more than politics. For the first 2 years, that seemed true. I worked directly under Samuel Wright, the division head at the time, a brilliant strategist who recognized my talent and pushed me to develop it. Under his mentorship, I helped secure 3 major clients and developed assessment tools that became standard across the company. When Sam announced he was leaving to start his own firm focused exclusively on environmental nonprofits, he recommended me as his replacement. Instead, Meridian brought in David from outside the company. His resume included a stint at a prestigious firm and connections to several board members, but notably lacked any background in sustainability. His first week, he asked me if this whole climate thing was really going to stick around. I should have left then. Sam offered me a position, with a raise. But Janet personally asked me to stay, to help David transition, and to continue the important work we'd started. She hinted that David was temporary, a strategic hire to please the board while the green division gained more traction. Just 18 months, she suggested. Then we'd reassess. So I stayed. I told myself it was for the clients who believed in what we were doing, for the junior staff who looked up to me, for the projects that might actually make a difference. 18 months turned into 3 years. David settled in, bringing Marcus with him from his previous company. The Green Division became the Sustainability Solutions Department, less about actual environmental impact and more about helping companies appear progressive while changing as little as possible. My role shifted from strategy development to implementation support. My ideas were too radical or not market ready. My name disappeared from proposals and presentations. And then came Helios. Eliza Hammond had founded Helios after 15 years as a research scientist developing more efficient solar capture technology. Her breakthrough wasn't just the technology itself, but its scalability, making high-performance solar storage possible for average homeowners, not just corporations or the wealthy. When she needed a marketing strategy that would help her revolutionary product reach mainstream consumers without losing its scientific credibility, a former colleague of mine referred her to Meridian. Specifically, to me. Our first meeting was scheduled as a standard new client intake. David and Marcus would handle the high-level discussion, and I would sit in to gather details for the execution phase. But Eliza had other ideas. "Before we start," she said, settling into the conference room chair, "I want to clarify that I'm here because of Sophia's reputation. I was told she understands both the science and the market. That's what Helios needs." David's smile didn't falter, but I saw his knuckles whiten around his pen. "Sophia is an invaluable member of our team. She'll certainly be involved in your project." "Involved isn't what I'm looking for," Eliza replied. "I want her leading it." That meeting stretched to 3 hours, with Eliza directing most questions to me, despite David's attempts to control the conversation. By the end, it was clear that Helios represented a significant opportunity for Meridian, potentially our largest client in the sustainability sector. It was equally clear that Eliza expected me to be her primary contact. In the elevator after she left, David finally dropped the smile. "Nice of your friend to put in a good word for you," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a compliment. "But client management is senior-level responsibility. You can handle the background work and brief me before meetings." "She's not my friend," I replied. "I've never met her before today, and she specifically requested me as the lead." Marcus chuckled. "Come on, Sophia. You know how clients are. They think they want the details person until they realize they need strategic direction. You'll still be valuable to the team." The elevator doors opened, and David patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Do what you do best. Make us look good. This account could mean big things for the department." I nodded, already knowing what big things meant: bonuses and recognition for David and Marcus. More work and zero credit for me. Over the next 3 months, I threw myself into the Helios project with an intensity that surprised even me. I conducted market research, interviewed potential consumers, analyzed competitor messaging, and developed a comprehensive strategy that honored both the scientific innovation and the practical benefits of Helios's technology. I created presentation decks, drafted press releases, designed implementation timelines, and built financial projections. I also developed a genuine connection with Eliza. We often spoke after official meetings ended, discussing everything from the technical aspects of her invention to the challenges of being a woman in male-dominated fields. She confided that some investors had suggested she hire a figurehead CEO, preferably a man with sales experience, to make the company more attractive to conservatives in the energy sector. "They don't think customers will trust complex technology coming from a woman," she said with a tired laugh. As if I didn't spend my entire career explaining complex technology to men who assumed I was the lab assistant. I understood completely. How many times had I watched clients direct technical questions to Marcus that he would then turn to me to answer? How often had David presented my analysis as what the team found, but my mistakes as Sophia's oversight? The night before the final presentation to Helios, I stayed at the office until 2 a.m., refining every slide, checking every number, anticipating every possible question. I sent the completed presentation to David, Marcus, and myself, along with detailed speaker notes explaining the reasoning behind each recommendation. Then I went home for a quick shower and change of clothes before the 9 a.m. meeting. I arrived at 8:15 to find David and Marcus already in the conference room. Doors closed. Through the glass walls, I could see them reviewing the presentation, David gesturing emphatically. I knocked before entering. "Morning," I said, setting down my bag. "I thought we could do a quick run-through before Eliza arrives." David looked up with an expression I'd come to recognize, false regret covering satisfaction. "Slight change of plans. Janet called this morning. She wants me to showcase our department's capabilities to the board today. Their quarterly meeting was moved up." My stomach tightened. "Both of you need to be there?" "Marcus will handle the Helios presentation," David replied. "You'll support from behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly. The usual arrangement." I kept my voice steady. "Eliza specifically asked for me to lead this project." Marcus spread his hands apologetically. We'll make it clear you did the heavy lifting, but one of us needs to be there to field high-level questions, and David can't be in two places at once. I can handle high-level questions, I said. David was already gathering his things. It's decided, Sophia. Marcus has been briefed on your work. The client won't know the difference, and it looks better to have senior representation. He headed for the door, then paused. Make sure the video conferencing is working perfectly for the board presentation. Last time the audio was cutting out. And just like that, I was demoted from project lead to technical support. When Eliza arrived, her face fell visibly upon seeing Marcus alone with me. Is there a problem? She asked. Just a scheduling conflict, Marcus assured her with his practiced smile. David had to present to our board today, but I'm fully up to speed, and Sophia will be here for any detailed questions. Eliza glanced at me, and I forced a professional nod. What choice did I have? Tell her that my bosses had deliberately sidelined me? That would only make me look powerless, or, worse, like I was trying to undermine my colleagues. Either way, not someone you'd want leading your multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. So I sat quietly while Marcus presented my work. I watched him stumble through explanations of concepts he clearly didn't understand. I saw Eliza's growing skepticism as she directed increasingly technical questions to him, which he would then deflect to me with a casual, Sophia, why don't you address that? By the end of the presentation, an unspoken understanding had developed between Eliza and me. Her eyes held a mixture of sympathy and resignation that I recognized from too many professional women forced to navigate male egos and institutional barriers. Still, the strategy itself was sound, and Eliza agreed to move forward with Meridian. As she was leaving, she pulled me aside. This isn't what I expected when I came to Meridian, she said quietly. The strategy is solid, I assured her. I'll be implementing everything we discussed. She studied me for a moment. Call me directly if anything gets lost in translation. I want your ideas, not a filtered version. I nodded, grateful for her perception and support. The following week, Janet sent the company-wide email congratulating David and Marcus on securing the Helios account. There was no mention of my contribution, not even the standard with support from our excellent team. I was erased completely from the victory. That email was the breaking point, the moment I stopped seeing myself as part of Meridian and started planning my exit. But I wouldn't just leave, I would leave with purpose. I closed my laptop, a strange calm settling over me. I was done being invisible. My revenge wouldn't be quick or dramatic. It would be meticulous, patient, and absolutely devastating. First, I needed leverage. I spent the next week cataloging every instance where my work had been claimed by others. I had emails, drafts with my digital fingerprints, meeting recordings where I'd presented ideas that later appeared in David's visionary strategies. I created a secure cloud folder with everything, including a detailed record of billable hours I'd worked versus what had been officially reported. The discrepancy was shocking even to me. I discovered I'd been effectively working unpaid overtime equivalent to a part-time job. Projects I'd led were billed at senior consultant rates, David's and Marcus's rates, while I was paid at the mid-level. Ideas I'd developed had been packaged into proprietary methodologies bearing David's name, generating additional revenue streams from which I received nothing. The pattern wasn't limited to me. Digging deeper, I found similar treatment of other women and minority employees in our department. Rachel from the research team had developed an innovative assessment tool that now appeared on our website as the Mercer Method. Jason, one of the few Black consultants, had written a white paper that Marcus had presented at a conference, accepting an industry award for thought leadership. This wasn't just about my wounded pride. It was systematic exploitation hiding behind corporate hierarchy. Next, I needed allies. Jenna from accounting had been passed over for promotion 3 times despite revolutionizing our billing system. Thomas in legal had warned about compliance issues that David repeatedly ignored. And Rita, our receptionist, noticed everything while being treated as if she were invisible. I didn't discuss my plans directly. I simply took them to lunch, listened to their frustrations, and made mental notes. Jenna confided that she'd automated processes that saved the company thousands of monthly labor hours, yet received only a modest performance bonus while her male supervisor took credit for the initiative in his promotion request. "I designed the entire system," she said, pushing her salad around the plate. Stephen couldn't write a basic Excel formula without help, but at the quarterly finance meeting, he presented it as his department's innovation. When I mentioned my role to Janet afterward, she seemed surprised I'd been involved at all. Thomas's situation was potentially more serious. He'd flagged several client contracts that contained provisions skirting ethical boundaries, particularly in data usage and environmental compliance reporting. "I raised concerns about greenwashing in the Westfield deal," he told me over coffee. David said he'd address it with the client, but the final contract still had the misleading language. When I brought it up again, he told me not to be overly cautious and that this is how business gets done. Rita's insights were perhaps the most valuable. As the executive assistant managing the front desk, she controlled the flow of visitors, overheard conversations, and maintained the company calendar. "People think I'm part of the furniture," she said with a wry smile. "They say things in front of me they wouldn't say to anyone else, and I see who meets with whom, who arrives early, who stays late, who's friendly with the board members." I asked if she'd noticed anything about how client accounts were assigned. She didn't hesitate. "David gives the high-profile clients to people who went to his alma mater or play golf at his club. The challenging clients with smaller budgets go to women and people of color, regardless of expertise. Then when those challenging projects succeed, despite the constraints, the credit flows upward." I nodded, unsurprised but still disappointed to have my observations confirmed. "Why are you asking?" Rita's eyes were shrewd. "Just trying to understand the patterns," I replied carefully. "I want to navigate the system better." She gave me a knowing look. "There are better systems to navigate, Sophia." The third step was the most crucial. I needed to understand our clients better than anyone else at Meridian possibly could. I began setting my alarm for 4 a.m., giving me 3 hours before anyone else arrived at the office. I used this time to create detailed profiles of our top clients, not just their business needs, but their personal preferences, their communication styles, their frustrations with our services that they were too polite to mention. I documented everything in an encrypted file I named Project Phoenix. For Helios, I created an exhaustive analysis of the renewable energy market, identifying micro-niches where their technology could gain early traction before scaling to larger markets. I researched potential partnership opportunities with home builders, community solar projects, and eco-conscious corporations looking to reduce their carbon footprint. For Arkwell Industries, a manufacturing client struggling to balance production efficiency with new environmental regulations, I developed a phased compliance strategy that would actually save them money in the long run through process improvements and energy recapture. For Greenstead Properties, a commercial real estate developer wanting to position their new building as a model of sustainability, I created a certification roadmap that would maximize their environmental credibility while minimizing costly structural changes. I also began building my personal brand outside of Meridian. I created a professional social media presence focused on sustainability marketing, sharing thoughtful insights without revealing client-specific information. I submitted articles to industry publications under my own name. I accepted speaking invitations to panels and conferences, taking personal days to attend. Each of these activities required careful balance. I needed to raise my professional profile without alerting David or Marcus to my intentions. I needed to excel at my Meridian responsibilities while building a foundation for independence. I needed to maintain perfect professionalism while quietly gathering evidence of their systematic credit theft. Most challenging of all, I needed to genuinely help our clients while positioning myself as an irreplaceable resource to them personally, distinct from Meridian as an institution. David and Marcus treated the Helios account like any other win. They made a few perfunctory follow-up calls, delegated the actual work to junior team members, and moved on to chasing the next commission. They didn't notice when I volunteered to handle routine maintenance calls with Eliza. They didn't register that I was staying late to ensure deliverables for Helios exceeded expectations rather than merely meeting them. The attention to detail in these reports is remarkable. Eliza told me during one of our calls, "It's like you're reading my mind about what we need." "I just believe in your vision," I replied. This, at least, was completely true. Over the following weeks, I established myself as Eliza's de facto consultant, the person she called directly when she needed quick answers or strategic advice. I maintained meticulous documentation of all official work for Meridian, but I also found ways to provide additional value that wasn't part of our contracted services. When Eliza mentioned struggling to communicate complex technical specifications to potential manufacturing partners, I created a visual guide translating the science into accessible infographics on my own time, as a professional courtesy. When she expressed frustration about an upcoming industry conference where she'd been relegated to a minor panel despite Helios's groundbreaking technology, I connected her with the event organizer, a former client who still returned my calls, and helped her secure a keynote speaking slot. These weren't services Meridian offered. They were personal favors from me to Eliza. Building a relationship that existed outside the corporate agreement, I employed similar strategies with other key clients, becoming their trusted advisor rather than just another Meridian consultant. I learned about their children's names, their hobbies, their professional aspirations. I remembered details from our conversations that informed my recommendations. I anticipated problems before they materialized and presented solutions before they needed to ask. All of this required careful balancing of my official workload with my unofficial relationship building. I developed systems for maximum efficiency, templates for recurring deliverables, automated tracking for repetitive tasks. I eliminated wasted time, no more company happy hours, no more extended lunches with colleagues, no more volunteering for committees that added nothing to my skill set or network. Every minute had strategic purpose. Every interaction advanced my plan. 3 months into my plan, an opportunity presented itself. David took a 2-week golf vacation, leaving Marcus to handle an important pitch to Wavelength Technologies, another potential client in the sustainable energy sector. I knew from my research that Wavelength's founder, Caroline Bishop, had a background in environmental science and a deep distrust of marketing fluff. The night before the pitch, I sent Marcus an email. "Just thought you might want to emphasize these talking points with Wavelength tomorrow," I wrote, attaching a document filled with precisely the kind of corporate jargon and empty promises that would alienate Caroline completely. The document wasn't obviously flawed. It contained all the expected elements of a client pitch: market analysis, proposed strategy, anticipated outcomes. But it framed everything in the slick, superficial language of traditional marketing rather than the substantive, science-based approach that would resonate with Caroline's background and values. I knew Marcus wouldn't recognize the mismatch because he had never bothered to research Caroline beyond the basics of her company's financial position. He didn't know she had spent a decade in academia before founding Wavelength. He didn't know she had published papers criticizing corporate greenwashing. He didn't know she specifically sought partners who prioritized accuracy over appealing messaging. Marcus took the bait, thanking me and incorporating every suggestion into his presentation. The meeting was a disaster. Caroline ended it early, and Wavelength signed with our competitors the following week. "I don't understand what happened," Marcus complained in the post-mortem meeting. I followed the standard approach. I nodded sympathetically. "Some clients just aren't a good fit." David, back from his golf trip with a tan and a collection of new sports metaphors, dismissed the loss casually. "Can't win them all. Focus on the next prospect." What no one knew was that I'd already been in contact with Caroline. We'd met at an industry conference where I'd attended a presentation she gave on greenwashing in corporate sustainability claims. I'd approached her afterward with thoughtful questions, and we'd exchanged contact information. A genuine connection, not a networking ploy. After our initial conversation, I'd followed up with an article I thought might interest her. A research paper on communication strategies for scientific innovations. Not a Meridian resource, just something from my personal reading that aligned with her interests. She'd responded with thoughtful comments, and a professional correspondence developed. I never mentioned Meridian's upcoming pitch to her. I didn't need to sabotage Marcus actively. I just needed to establish myself as someone who understood Caroline's values and approach. The contrast between that understanding and Marcus's tone-deaf presentation would do the rest. With Wavelength officially off Meridian's prospect list, I was free to reach out to Caroline in a personal capacity to discuss her frustrations with finding the right marketing partner. Our coffee meeting turned into a 3-hour conversation about authentic communication in the sustainability sector. "I wish I'd met you before that disaster meeting with your company," she said as we parted. "You actually understand what we're trying to accomplish." I just smiled. Sometimes things happen exactly when they're supposed to. Meanwhile, I continued providing exceptional service to Eliza at Helios, going far beyond what Meridian was actually contracted to deliver. I created additional market analysis reports, just because I thought you might find this interesting. I connected her with potential investors from my personal network. I became indispensable not as a company representative, but as Sophia Reynolds. I also began carefully documenting instances where David and Marcus mismanaged the Helios account. When they missed a deadline for delivering quarterly projections, I stepped in to complete the work overnight, emailing the finished product to Eliza with a casual note about a slight delay in our process. When they approved marketing materials containing technical inaccuracies about Helios's technology, I caught the errors before publication and quietly corrected them. Each time, I saved the client relationship while generating evidence of my superior's incompetence. Each time, I strengthened my personal connection with Eliza while Meridian's institutional credibility eroded. This pattern continued for months, not just with Helios and Wavelength, but with other clients and potential clients. I became a shadow consultant, the person clients actually relied on while David and Marcus collected the formal recognition and compensation. During this time, I also nurtured relationships with my internal allies. I helped Jenna document the full impact of her billing system innovations, creating a clear before and after analysis that quantified the time and money saved. I supported Thomas in developing clearer ethical guidelines for client contracts, framing them as risk management protocols rather than moral imperatives, making them more palatable to leadership. I recognized Rita's organizational talents and treated her as a valued professional rather than administrative support. None of these actions were explicitly tied to my exit strategy. They were simply the right things to do, recognizing the contributions of overlooked colleagues. But they also created a network of goodwill that would prove invaluable later. At the 6-month mark of my plan, I had accumulated a substantial portfolio of evidence documenting systematic credit theft and mismanagement at Meridian. I had established strong personal relationships with key clients independent of my company role. I had built a professional reputation through published articles, speaking engagements, and social media presence. And I had identified the specific contractual vulnerabilities that would allow me to leave without legal repercussions. It was time for the next phase. I scheduled a meeting with Janet Palmer, the CEO. Her assistant seemed surprised by the request. Mid-level consultants rarely sought direct meetings with the chief executive, but approved it after checking Janet's calendar. I prepared meticulously for this conversation, organizing my evidence into clear categories, anticipating objections, and practicing my delivery to ensure I would remain calm and professional regardless of the response. I dressed with particular care that morning, choosing a conservative suit that projected seriousness without aggression. Janet's office occupied the corner of the top floor, with windows on 2 sides offering panoramic views of the city. She greeted me with the practiced warmth of an executive who meets too many people to remember them all individually. "Sophia, good to see you. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk. How can I help you today?" I took a seat across from her desk. "Thank you for making time, Janet. I've prepared a brief presentation on an issue I believe requires your attention." I opened my laptop and turned it to face her. Over the past several years, I've observed a concerning pattern in our department. Work performed by myself and others is consistently attributed to senior staff, particularly David Mercer and Marcus Webb. Janet's expression shifted from polite interest to guarded caution. "That's a serious allegation. It's not an allegation, it's a documented fact. I began methodically presenting my evidence, emails showing my authorship of documents later presented as David's work. Meeting recordings where my ideas were appropriated without attribution. Billing records showing the discrepancy between who performed the work and who received credit. This isn't just about recognition, I explained. It's about compensation and advancement. When junior staff do senior-level work but receive neither the credit nor the corresponding pay, it creates both ethical and potentially legal issues. I showed her the broader pattern affecting other employees, being careful not to name anyone who hadn't explicitly authorized me to do so. I presented data on turnover rates among women and minorities in our department compared to white men. I calculated the financial impact of these disparities on both the affected employees and the company's potential liability. Janet listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she closed my laptop gently and pushed it back toward me. I had no idea this was happening. Sophia, we don't condone this kind of behavior at Meridian. Her words were right, but something in her tone triggered my doubt. It seemed practiced, as if she'd had similar conversations before. I'm not looking to cause problems, I said calmly. I just want fair treatment moving forward, appropriate recognition of contributions, transparency in client relationships, and compensation that reflects the level of work being performed. Janet nodded. Of course, these are reasonable requests, and they align with Meridian's values. I'll need to look into this further and have some conversations with David and HR. I understand. When should I expect to hear about next steps? She considered for a moment. Give me a month to investigate properly and develop a plan to address these issues. Would that timeline work for you? Yes, that seems reasonable. I gathered my things, maintaining the same professional demeanor. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. As I reached the door, Janet called after me. Sophia, I appreciate you bringing this to me directly rather than going to HR first. It shows real commitment to the company. I smiled politely. I believe in addressing problems at the appropriate level. What I didn't say was that I had already provided copies of my documentation to both HR and legal through anonymous channels, establishing a paper trail that Janet couldn't simply ignore or bury. What I also didn't say was that I had recorded our entire conversation legally under our state's one-party consent laws. I had given Janet the opportunity to do the right thing, but I wasn't relying on her integrity. The following weeks were an exercise in patience. I continued performing my duties excellently, maintained my client relationships, and watched for any signs of reaction from leadership. David and Marcus seemed unchanged, suggesting Janet hadn't yet confronted them. HR didn't contact me. Everything continued as before. 3 weeks after our meeting, Janet's assistant scheduled a follow-up discussion. I prepared for either a genuine resolution or, more likely, a diplomatic dismissal of my concerns. The actual meeting fell somewhere in between. Janet presented what she called a departmental restructuring that would address communication issues and recognize contributor value. In practice, it amounted to minor procedural changes that wouldn't fundamentally alter the power dynamics or credit attribution. We'll implement a new project tracking system where all team members can log their contributions, she explained. And we'll create more opportunities for junior staff to present to clients with senior supervision. Her emphasis on senior supervision told me everything I needed to know. The hierarchy would remain intact. David and Marcus would still control client relationships and take credit for successful outcomes. The only difference would be a more elaborate paper trail documenting who did what, a paper trail that would likely never factor into promotion or compensation decisions. Is there a timeline for implementing these changes? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. We'll roll them out over the next quarter, Janet replied. And David will be fully involved in shaping the implementation to ensure it works with the department's existing processes. Translation: David would have the power to dilute or undermine any changes that threatened his position. I nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for taking this seriously. I look forward to seeing how these changes improve our team dynamics. Janet seemed relieved by my apparent acceptance. I'm glad we could find a constructive path forward. Meridian values your contributions. Sophia. 1 month after my initial meeting with Janet, the company announced the departmental reorganization. David received a bigger office and the new title of Executive Director. Marcus got a raise and was promoted to Senior Manager. Several other senior staff, all white men, received various perks and title enhancements. My name appeared in a paragraph thanking the dedicated team members who support our client success every day. Alongside my recognition came a $50 Starbucks gift card in a company envelope. The message couldn't have been clearer if it had been written in neon. Nothing was going to change. That evening, I registered a business name, Phoenix Consulting. I submitted my resignation the next day, giving the standard 2 weeks' notice. David seemed more annoyed than concerned. "Where are you going?" he asked, barely looking up from his phone. "I'm pursuing an independent venture," I replied. Now he looked up. "You're not taking clients, are you? Your contract has a non-compete clause." I smiled. I'm fully aware of my contractual obligations. What David didn't know was that Thomas from Legal had already reviewed my contract at my request and found that the non-compete was worded specifically to prevent employees from taking clients to competitor firms. It said nothing about starting your own consultancy, a loophole that had never been closed because no one expected someone like me to have that kind of ambition. "Good," David said, returning to his phone. "We'll need a comprehensive handover of all your client materials. Marcus will oversee the transition." "Of course," I replied. "I'll prepare detailed documentation." What I didn't mention was that I had already been preparing this documentation for months, organizing every project meticulously while carefully separating client-specific knowledge, which belonged to Meridian, from industry insights and methodologies I had developed independently, which belonged to me. I also didn't mention the conversations I'd already had with Jenna, Thomas, and Rita about their own professional futures. When David finally looked up again, he seemed to realize something else. "You'll need to return any company property, laptop, files, client contact information." "Absolutely," I agreed. "I'll ensure everything is properly transferred." What remained unspoken was that my most valuable assets, my relationships with clients, my understanding of their needs, my professional reputation, couldn't be handed over like a laptop or access card. Those would leave with me, no matter what paperwork I signed. Word of my resignation spread quickly through the office. Colleagues stopped by my desk with expressions ranging from genuine regret to barely concealed satisfaction. Junior team members looked worried. I had been their buffer against David and Marcus's more unreasonable demands. Senior staff speculated openly about who would inherit my clients. Janet called me to her office that afternoon. Unlike our previous meetings, this conversation was brief and direct. "I'm disappointed by your timing," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We just announced changes that addressed your concerns." "The changes didn't actually address my concerns," I replied calmly. "They reinforced the existing hierarchy while creating the appearance of reform." Janet's professional mask slipped slightly. "You didn't give the new system a chance to work." "The system was designed not to work. When you put David in charge of implementing changes meant to reduce his power, you guaranteed failure." She sighed, looking suddenly tired. "Politics are part of any organization. Sophia, you need to learn to navigate them, not just opt out when things don't go your way." "I'm not opting out. I'm choosing a different path. A path that will be much harder than you imagine. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to build a consulting business from scratch? The overhead, the client acquisition costs, the feast or famine cycles?" I met her gaze steadily. "Yes, I do. I've done my research and developed a comprehensive business plan. But thank you for your concern." Something shifted in Janet's expression. Perhaps respect, perhaps irritation at my confidence. "Well, I wish you luck. But remember that your contract prohibits soliciting Meridian clients for 2 years after your departure." "I'm aware of the terms," I said, rising to leave. "I don't intend to violate any legal obligations." As I reached the door, Janet called after me, echoing our previous meeting. "Sophia?" For what it's worth, I do believe you deserved better recognition for your work. I paused without turning around. Then why didn't you ensure I received it? I didn't wait for her answer. My last 2 weeks at Meridian were a masterclass in professionalism. I documented all my processes, trained my replacement thoroughly, and handed over all client files. I even brought cupcakes on my last day. Everyone remarked on how well I was taking my career change. No one asked where I was going. During those 2 weeks, I also finalized the foundational elements of Phoenix Consulting. I secured a virtual office address, built a professional website highlighting my expertise and published work, established the necessary legal and financial structures, and refined my service offerings based on market research and identified client needs. I was particularly careful about my interactions with current Meridian clients. I didn't initiate any conversations about my departure or future plans. When clients asked directly, I simply confirmed I was leaving to start my own consultancy focused on sustainability marketing, without suggesting they should follow me. Instead, I ensured that my last interactions with them as a Meridian employee were exceptionally positive. I provided extra value, responded quickly to requests, and left them with comprehensive resources they could reference after my departure. I wanted their final impression to be of my professionalism and expertise, not a sales pitch for my new venture the Monday after I left Meridian. I sent personalized emails to Eliza at Helios and Caroline at Wavelength, announcing my new consulting business and inquiring if they might be interested in working with me directly. Both responded within hours. By Friday, I had signed contracts with both companies at rates higher than what they'd been paying Meridian. My email to Eliza was carefully crafted. I didn't disparage Meridian or suggest she terminate her existing contract. I simply informed her of my new venture and mentioned that I would be available if she ever needed additional support beyond what Meridian provided. Her response was immediate. Can we talk today? There are some concerns with how Meridian has been handling our account since you left. When we spoke, Eliza detailed a week of frustration. Marcus had taken over as her primary contact and had missed 2 scheduled calls. The junior consultant assigned to implementation didn't understand the technology well enough to create effective messaging. A press release had gone out with factual errors about Helios's product specifications. It's been chaos, Eliza said. I realized how much you were doing behind the scenes to make everything work. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, genuinely concerned for her company's success. I tried to ensure a smooth transition. It's not your responsibility to compensate for their incompetence, she said firmly. I've decided to terminate our contract with Meridian. Would you be able to take over our marketing strategy directly through your new company? I explained that while I would be delighted to work with Helios, I needed to ensure we proceeded legally to avoid any contractual complications. I understand Meridian has a non-compete clause with its former employees, Eliza said. I've already consulted our legal team. If we terminate our relationship with Meridian first and then independently choose to work with Phoenix Consulting, there's no violation. You aren't soliciting us away. We're choosing to follow the expertise we need. Similar conversations occurred with Caroline at Wavelength, who had never formally engaged Meridian and was therefore completely free to contract with Phoenix Consulting. Your approach aligns perfectly with our philosophy, she told me. Authentic communication based on scientific substance, not marketing fluff. When can you start? By the end of my first week as an independent consultant, I had secured 2 major clients who provided enough revenue to sustain my business through the critical early months. I rented a modest office space in a co-working environment, set up professional systems for billing and project management, and began delivering on my commitments. When David called me, furious, I answered pleasantly. This is a breach of contract, he sputtered. We'll sue you into oblivion. I don't believe it is, I replied calmly. But you're welcome to have your lawyers contact mine. In the meantime, you should know that Eliza specifically terminated Helios's contract with Meridian before signing with me. And Caroline never actually became a Meridian client. So there's nothing to breach there. I've documented everything meticulously. There was a long silence before he spoke again, his voice lower now. What do you want? Nothing from you, David. I already have everything I need. He tried another approach. Janet is extremely disappointed. She gave you opportunities that other consultants would kill for. Janet gave me nothing, I corrected him. Every opportunity I received at Meridian, I earned through my work that you and Marcus repeatedly took credit for. If she's disappointed, perhaps she should examine why a valued employee felt compelled to leave rather than continue in an environment that exploited her talents while denying her recognition. This isn't over, Sophia, he warned before hanging up. I expected legal threats to follow, but they never materialized. Thomas had been right about the contract loophole, and Meridian's lawyers apparently advised against pursuing a case they would likely lose. Instead, David and Marcus embarked on a whisper campaign, suggesting to industry contacts that I had stolen proprietary methodologies and client information. This backfired spectacularly when several clients, not just Helios and Wavelength, came to my defense, making it clear that they had chosen to work with me based on my personal expertise and integrity, not stolen materials. Sophia developed our entire strategy herself. Eliza told a prominent industry publication that covered rising stars in sustainability consulting. Her understanding of both the technical and market aspects of renewable energy is unparalleled. Any firm would be lucky to have her, but I'm glad she's chosen to work directly with innovative companies like ours. Within 3 months, Phoenix Consulting had 6 clients, including 4 more who had left Meridian. Word had spread through the sustainability sector about my new venture, and companies that valued substance over corporate prestige began reaching out. My calendar filled with pitches and client meetings. I found myself in the unexpected position of having to be selective about which projects I accepted. I also began building my own team. My first hire was Jenna, who had finally reached her breaking point at Meridian after her latest innovation was credited to her supervisor in a company-wide announcement. I'd like to offer you the position of financial director at Phoenix, I told her over lunch. Full creative control over our systems, equity in the company, and a salary 30% higher than what you're making now. Jenna nearly choked on her sandwich. Are you serious? You can afford that as a startup? I've run the numbers, I assured her. Your efficiency systems will more than pay for the salary difference, and I believe in investing in talent from the beginning, not as an afterthought. She accepted on the spot. Thomas joined soon after, first as external counsel and eventually as our full-time legal and compliance officer. His ethical approach to contract development became one of our key differentiators in an industry often criticized for deceptive practices. Even Rita left Meridian to become our client relations manager, bringing her extraordinary organizational skills and institutional knowledge. I've spent 15 years watching executives take credit for other people's work, she told me on her first day. I'm ready to be part of a company that does things differently. With each new hire, I implemented the policies I had wished for at Meridian: transparent credit for contributions, equity distribution to key team members, collaborative decision-making, and compensation tied directly to value creation rather than hierarchical position. We weren't perfect. We faced the usual startup challenges, cash flow constraints, occasional client misalignments, the struggle to scale systems as we grew. But we addressed these challenges openly, without the politics and credit stealing that had characterized my Meridian experience. As Phoenix grew, so did its reputation. We became known for substance over flash, for results over promises, for ethical practices in an industry often accused of greenwashing. Clients came to us when they wanted authentic sustainability strategies, not just marketing that made them appear environmentally conscious. My favorite moment came at the annual Sustainability in Business conference, where I was invited to speak on a panel about authentic marketing in the green energy sector. From the stage, I could see David and Marcus in the audience, their faces frozen in identical expressions of disbelief as I was introduced as the consultant behind Helios's groundbreaking market position. Helios had become the industry success story of the year. Their revolutionary solar storage technology had exceeded sales projections by 340%, secured major distribution partnerships, and attracted significant additional investment. The marketing strategy I had developed, now implemented without David and Marcus's interference, had perfectly positioned them at the intersection of technical innovation and consumer accessibility. After the panel, Eliza hugged me in front of them. "Best decision I ever made was following you when you left that place," she said, loud enough for them to hear. I didn't acknowledge them. They had become irrelevant to my story. Later that evening, at the conference reception, Janet approached me at the bar. She looked older, more tired than when I'd last seen her. "Congratulations on your success," she said, gesturing to the crowd of industry leaders who had been eager to speak with me after the panel. "You've made quite a name for yourself." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciative of the acknowledgement. "I should have listened to you," she admitted after a moment. "About David and the others. Things haven't been going well at Meridian since you left." I wasn't surprised. In the year since my departure, 4 more valued employees had left Meridian to join Phoenix. Numerous clients had followed. The department's reputation had suffered as the quality of their work declined without the unacknowledged contributions of those they had exploited. "It's not too late to make changes," I suggested. "There are still talented people at Meridian who deserve better recognition and opportunities." Janet studied me with a mixture of regret and resignation. "Would you consider coming back? As department head this time, with full autonomy, David could be moved to another division." The offer was vindicating, but ultimately irrelevant. "I appreciate the offer, Janet. But I'm building something I believe in, something that reflects my values from the ground up, not as an afterthought or correction." She nodded, understanding. "Well, if you ever want to discuss a potential merger or acquisition," I smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." We both knew it wouldn't happen. Phoenix wasn't just succeeding, it was thriving specifically because of the culture and practices that differentiated us from firms like Meridian. Our success wasn't despite our ethical approach, it was because of it. 1 year after that first betraying email, Phoenix Consulting moved into our own office space. The windows faced east to catch the morning sun. On moving day, I placed a single item on my new desk, that unused $50 Starbucks gift card in its original envelope, not as a reminder of the insult, but as a symbol of how profoundly they had underestimated me. We celebrated with champagne and takeout. The entire team gathered in our new conference room, no longer my team, but truly our team, as each member held equity and had a voice in major decisions. "I want to toast not just where we are," I said, raising my glass, "but how we got here. Not through cutting corners or claiming others' work, but by creating genuine value and sharing both the credit and the rewards. That's the foundation Phoenix is built on, and it's what will sustain us as we grow." The company expanded rapidly over the next 2 years. We opened a second office, then a third. We developed proprietary methodologies, properly credited to their actual creators. We won industry awards for our innovative approaches to sustainability marketing and communications. Most importantly, we maintained our core values even as we scaled. Every employee received equity. Every contributor was acknowledged. Every client relationship was based on authenticity and mutual respect. David eventually left Meridian for a position at a larger firm, where his political skills served him well in the corporate hierarchy. Marcus remained, promoted to fill David's role, but struggling to maintain the department's position as its reputation and client base continued to erode. Janet reached out periodically with partnership proposals, each more generous than the last. I always declined politely. Though we maintained a cordial professional relationship, she had made her choices, just as I had made mine. 5 years after founding Phoenix, I received an unexpected email from Samuel Wright, my original mentor at Meridian who had left to focus on environmental nonprofits. "I've been watching your success from afar," he wrote. "What you've built is exactly what I hoped to create but never quite managed. Would you be interested in discussing how we might combine our expertise? My nonprofit focus and your corporate approach could create something truly revolutionary in the sustainability space." This partnership made sense in a way Meridian never had. Within 6 months, We had merged our firms to create Phoenix Impact Partners, offering comprehensive sustainability consulting across both corporate and nonprofit sectors. Sam became our Chief Impact Officer while I continued as CEO. On the day we announced the merger, I received a LinkedIn message from Marcus. "Congratulations on your continued success," he wrote. "I always knew you had potential." I didn't bother responding. His belated recognition meant nothing compared to the reality we had created. A firm where potential was actively nurtured rather than exploited. Where success was shared rather than hoarded. People often ask me if I started my business out of spite. If all this success was just elaborate revenge, that's not quite right. What happened at Meridian didn't make me ambitious or talented or determined. I already was all those things. What it did was free me from the belief that I needed their approval or permission to succeed. They took credit for my work, yes, but in doing so, they forced me to finally claim it for myself. Sometimes, the greatest act of revenge is simply becoming exactly who you were meant to be all along. And sometimes, justice comes not from bringing others down, but from rising so far above them that they become nothing more than a distant, forgettable detail in your origin story. Meridian Consulting is struggling these days, from what I hear. Apparently, they've had trouble retaining clients. David was asked to take early retirement. Marcus is still there, endlessly repeating his MBA stories to diminishing returns. As for me, I'm too busy building something meaningful to think about them much anymore. My company is thriving, expanding into new markets with a team that shares both the work and the credit equally. The truth is, the most satisfying revenge isn't taking what belongs to someone else. It's finally claiming what was yours all along, and then creating so much more that they couldn't possibly take credit for it all, even if they tried. That email was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the moment I stopped being a supporting character in someone else's success story and became the author of my own. Sometimes I wonder if I should send David and Marcus a thank you note. But I suspect the quarterly industry reports, where Phoenix Consulting consistently appears in the Rising Stars section while Meridian's name slides further down the rankings, are message enough. They took my work and put their names on it. I took their clients and built an empire. I'd call that even. What most people don't realize about workplace revenge is that the long game is infinitely more satisfying than any immediate gratification. Had I simply exposed David and Marcus publicly or sabotaged them directly, I would have been labeled as difficult, emotional, or unprofessional. The very stereotypes used to dismiss women who stand up for themselves in corporate environments. Instead, by channeling my anger into strategic planning and execution, I created something that not only benefited me, but also changed the landscape for others. Phoenix became a model for how consulting firms could operate with integrity and still achieve remarkable success. The impact extended beyond our immediate sphere. Former Meridian clients who switched to Phoenix began implementing similar transparency and credit-sharing practices within their own organizations. Competitors in our space found themselves pressured to improve their treatment of junior staff to compete for talent. Industry publications ran features on our equity model and collaborative approach. This broader change was the true victory, creating a ripple effect that transformed practices well beyond what I could have accomplished through direct confrontation. As Phoenix Impact Partners celebrated its 7th anniversary, I received an invitation to give the keynote address at the same conference where, years earlier, I had sat on that panel while David and Marcus watched from the audience. My speech wasn't about revenge or justice or even my personal journey. It was about the future of sustainability consulting, the integration of scientific rigor with authentic communication, the alignment of profit with purpose, the responsibility of businesses to create genuine positive impact rather than merely appearing environmentally conscious. But in my closing remarks, I did allow myself one personal reflection. The traditional corporate model often treats recognition and success as finite resources to be hoarded and protected, I told the audience. What we've proven at Phoenix is that the opposite is true. When credit is shared, when contributions are valued regardless of hierarchy, when success is collective rather than individual, the entire organization becomes more innovative, more resilient, and ultimately more successful. In the front row sat Janet Palmer, now retired from Meridian after orchestrating its acquisition by a larger consulting firm at a fraction of its former valuation. Beside her was Sam, beaming with pride at what we had built together. Scattered throughout the audience were Phoenix team members, some who had been with me from the beginning, others who had joined recently, drawn by our reputation. After the speech, a young consultant approached me, her expression earnest. "Your company's model is why I entered this field," she told me. "The idea that I could contribute meaningfully without having to play politics or watch my work be claimed by others." "That's exactly why we built it this way," I replied. "To create the environment we wished had existed when we were starting out." Later that evening, at the gala dinner, I found myself seated near Marcus, now working for one of our competitors after Meridian's acquisition had eliminated his position. He'd aged visibly. The confident swagger replaced by a slightly desperate energy as he tried to impress the executives at his table. He noticed me watching and raised his glass in my direction, a gesture somewhere between acknowledgement and surrender. I returned the gesture politely before turning back to my conversation with Caroline from Wavelength, now a close friend as well as a long-term client. I felt no satisfaction in his diminished circumstances, no vindictive pleasure in the reversal of our fortunes. Those emotions had lost their hold on me years ago, replaced by something far more valuable, the quiet confidence of knowing I had built something worthwhile on my own terms. The final irony was that David and Marcus had actually done me a favor. Had they treated me fairly, acknowledged my contributions, allowed me to advance within Meridian, I might have remained there indefinitely, successful by conventional standards but constrained by an institutional structure I didn't create and values I didn't share. Their betrayal had forced me to envision a different path, to risk security for possibility, to create rather than merely succeed within someone else's creation. As Phoenix continued to grow, I increasingly turned my attention to the future, expanding our services into new sectors, mentoring the next generation of consultants, developing innovative approaches to emerging sustainability challenges. The past that had once consumed me now occupied barely a footnote in the ongoing story. 10 years after founding Phoenix, I published a book on ethical leadership and sustainable business practices. It became a bestseller and led to speaking engagements around the world. The Meridian chapter of my career warranted just a few pages, not centered on the betrayal, but on the lessons learned and the vision it ultimately inspired. At one of these speaking events, a student asked what advice I would give to someone facing similar workplace injustice. "Document everything," I began practically. "Know your contractual rights. Build relationships based on genuine value. Develop skills that are portable rather than institution-specific." I paused, then added, "But most importantly, recognize when an environment is limiting who you can become. Sometimes the path forward isn't fighting for recognition within a broken system, but creating a new system that renders the old one obsolete." It was the truth I had lived, not a story of revenge, but of reinvention. Not about getting even, but about getting free. The coffee that had grown cold beside my keyboard that day as I read the congratulatory email to David and Marcus had long since been forgotten. But the clarity I found in that moment, the determination to create something better, remained the foundation of everything that followed. That, in the end, was the most perfect revenge of all. Not that they lost, but that I discovered who I could be once I stopped playing their game and created my own.